Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bytes of Brilliance. I'm your host, Carsten Kraus, and today we're diving deep into the world of ChatGPT, generative AI, with Scott Gerard, a certified senior data scientist, AI guru at KnowledgeReactor.ai, and a member of the AIoT Center of Excellence. I'm so glad to have you. I'm looking forward to discussing all of the possibilities of ChatGPT, generative AI, and all the solutions that are out there. I'm certainly talking to a lot of CDOs and CIOs that are trying to see, how can they leverage a large language model within their organization. But before we even go there, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about your journey. What led you to start KnowledgeReactor.ai, and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, well, I've always kind of been interested in mathematics and technology. And so that led me to degrees in physics and mathematics. And then eventually I got a PhD in multi-agent systems, which is not as well known, but is a subfield of artificial intelligence. So that's kind of who I am just generally. Started work at IBM many decades ago, and I worked on a lot of different cool technologies. The two that I think are probably the most interesting is I was the first technical leader trying to apply the Watson technology to the financial services sector. And that got me deeply into natural language processing. And that also then kind of helped prepare me for this whole generative AI technology burst that's come out in the last few years. So that was one of those experiences. And the other one was I was in a research team, and I was the leader. We were applying artificial intelligence and IoT technology to try to keep elders in their homes as long as possible. And I used it on my own in-laws, and I thought we kept them in their home another 7 months beyond when they would have otherwise had to have worked.
Mhm.
So that's kind of who I am. I did leave IBM. I decided to go out on my own. There's just too much cool technology out there to play with that I wasn't getting enough chance to explore on my own. So now I'm doing it as a company.
Wow. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So you were really building out the foundation for artificial intelligence as we experience it right now, very early on. That's exciting. So,
Exactly.
okay, so let's jump right in. Can you give our listeners an introduction how technologies like ChatGPT and other generative AI are having a profound impact on businesses today?
Well, I think there's a lot of things going on here. Kind of at a technical level, I have never seen an NLP technology, a natural language processing technology, that can parse text as well, that can understand what's in it, and that can generate new text. I've never seen any other technology besides these generative AIs. It's a step above anything I've ever seen before, and I think that's fundamentally the kind of value that they're bringing to the table. The other thing is that we are very fluid and comfortable using text to communicate with each other. Now we can use these large language models to communicate with our devices as well. And I think that's another part of it. And then the final part is, it would be interesting if two or three of the major big tech companies had this kind of technology, but nobody else did. But that's not the case. These are pervasive. Anybody on the planet who's got a computer can talk to either ChatGPT or Bard or any one of the others, and they can start playing with this technology. That's just so fundamentally democratizing. It's just astounding. So that's kind of the technical part of it. But at a business level, what can you do with it? What value can you get from it? Well, these things can chew through large documents way faster than you can. They can summarize summarize documents. They can generate high quality output. So if you need to generate some emails or some reports or some marketing copy or whatever else, and then the way that the systems work underneath, they can identify similarities in documents in a much deeper way than we've been able to do before. And I think those are some of the things that really make this technology stand out.
Yeah, I think, Scott, you're like right on the money. It's really about seeing is believing. And I just have to think back on, the whole movement of blockchain technology. We're trying to explain this is huge. You gotta do something about this. This is gonna disrupt our businesses. It's gonna make a difference. And you had a whole, even TED Talks trying to explain what is blockchain technology about, and you still didn't get it. I mean, it's still very hard to translate. I mean, I get it, the immutability, the trust, being able to kind of make sure that you have traceability. I see a lot of value in that, but it's so hard to explain versus, if you look at these like ChatGPT and generative AI, it's just obvious. It jumps in your face how important this is and how intuitive and how easy it is for a non-technical person to create something, for a non-technical person to create images, create video, even write code as a non-coder, right? It's amazing. ChatGPT and some of these technologies were made public, maybe a little bit fast, but you can see the value, obviously. But then you also have the flip side of people, putting information that they maybe shouldn't put in like an open AI framework where that's used for learning. Hopefully, the researchers will take care of the information and keep PII data and everything safe. But it's one of these things. Yeah, just to rely on that, it's another thing. But still, from cost savings to innovation, what are some of the key opportunities you see for businesses leveraging generative AI and technologies like ChatGPT?
Well, I really like the way you even phrase that question. When I talk with my clients, I think there are two big categories of use cases. One is I'm seeking efficiency, right? And that is there's something that I'm already doing. I want to do it better.
Right.
Better could be cheaper, faster, fewer errors, higher quality, at scale, whatever better means to you. But a lot of people are, I want to do something I'm doing today better. Great. That's the efficiency angle. The other one is seeking innovation. There's something that I want to do that I've never been able to do before. Either I didn't have the technology, I didn't have the programmers, I didn't have the money, maybe I didn't even have the idea before. But I think those are kind of the two big kinds of use cases that will help people get around it, because I think people think you have to do both, but I think doing one or the other is a better solution. So there's a lot of ways you can go, and large language models can help with both. From the efficiency point of view, writer's block, right? I got this blank piece of paper in front of me. What the heck am I going to put on it? I kind of know what I want, but I can't get started. Use an LLM to generate you some text to get started. Now, you don't have to use it. And in fact, I wouldn't recommend that you use it verbatim, but use it, get started, cut the pieces you like and delete the pieces you don't, that kind of thing.
Right.
You want to write some copy, blog posts, social media posts, whatever. Personal training. I think there's some really good opportunities for that, which is kind of on the innovation part of you. And I actually was talking with some clients and they said, Scott, you really need a story here to kind of drive this home. People really relate to stories, right? You need to do something. So I went to ChatGPT and said, I kind of know what I want to put in here, but I can't get started, right? It's not the total blank piece of paper, but it's the same sort of idea. So I said, write me a story. And it wrote me a story about Walter and Edna and how they were living happily, but then Walter had a problem. And it just got me over the hump. And so there's a lot of things that you can do with it. But I encourage my clients to think about these two use cases, because otherwise it's just too big to comprehend and too big to get your hands around. I think that whole connecting the dots thing is it's not something that a lot of people are doing just right now, but it's coming very soon. Right. I kind of think of it, when many years ago, we used to buy a stereo with a bunch of components, right? The turntable was separate from the receiver, was separate from the amplifier and the speakers. I think there's going to be a lot more of that but it's a richer picture, right? We're going to use the large language models over here, but we're going to use some other AI here, and we're going to use the vision components, maybe 2 or 3 of them over here, and it's the connection of all of them that's the value is going to grow exponentially because of that. Each one provides value, but together they really are going to give a huge bump in value.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was a really, really good insight there. Maybe kind of switching the game a little bit here or focus. Obviously, one of the things that everybody's talking about is, we need to pause ChatGPT. We need to look at, what it could be dangerous, right? It could be, all the way to, if artificial general intelligence, that's when you reach the human level or better capabilities. There's concerns with that, kind of almost like a
existential threat.
At the same time, the smaller steps are also, when you roll these things out very fast, they might have an impact on 10% or 20% of workforce, but that in itself has a huge impact, right? Because those are large numbers, right? So while the opportunities are enormous, there are also limitations and regulations to consider. Can you shed some light on what companies should be aware of in this domain?
Absolutely. It is awesome, cool technology. And if you're on there's the fear to fabulous kind of spectrum. And if you approach it that way, it's like, well, there's only one answer. I think there's 2 answers. I think large language models will be used for good. I think that's a fact. They also will be used for bad. There are problems with it. So I'm actually at multiple places on that spectrum. And I think that's why I encourage people to play with this, to learn what works and to learn what fails, because there are real problems with these large language models. They're better than not, but we have to understand what the limitations are. The hallucinations are the one that most people talk about, right? This is where the language model just kind of gets wandered off into embedding space and just kind of takes off and goes somewhere else, right? We need to understand that that's the case. Now, I've heard other people say, well, just get your programmers to fix those, put up the right guardrails. We should put up guardrails. I completely agree with that. But to think that we can 100% eliminate hallucinations, I think that's a fantasy right now. We don't really understand how these models really work. How can they be so incredibly valuable right now? I can't explain that. I don't think anybody can. And because of that, we don't know how to actually fix the problems when they're close, but not right. So hallucinations are one. One of the other things that maybe a lot of people don't understand is that they think that they put in one prompt and they get one response back. That's typically not the case. Typically, there's a whole sequence of steps that are being processed to give you your final answer. And so one of the problems is that there can be what's called prompt injection, where I type in my question, but then there's another component that modifies my prompt and does some changes to it, hopefully for the better, but maybe not. Maybe it's malicious. So you need to understand that there are these potential problems with the technology itself. You also talked then a little bit about the regulatory environment. And I think that's really interesting too. There are some people that think, we have to regulate this stuff right here, right now. It's developing very rapidly. And as a company, I think you should get some of your lawyers involved in this. You don't have to have the final answer today, but start looking into it. Start thinking about what would this regulation mean for us? How would I have to adapt to it, right? I don't think it's been passed into law yet. It certainly hasn't gone into force yet. I think that's a very interesting one. The thing that I think is most interesting about it, at least one of the things, is they divide AI algorithms into risk levels. So some of them are like, who cares? I mean, like, if Netflix makes the wrong recommendation for you, how bad is that really? It's not bad at all, really, right? So there's the minimum layer of risk. There's kind of this medium layer of risk, which is interesting. But then they get to this high risk thing. This is things like I'm using AI to make decisions about employment, to make decisions about sentencing, decisions about risk, credit, risk. Am I going to give you guys a loan or whatever? And they have very much higher level of restrictions on what those applications have to match. And then, of course, they have another one on the top that's unacceptable risk. They just will not allow you to do any AI in those particular realms. I think that's a really good idea. So what about the rest of the countries in the world? Because everybody seems to be wanting to do their own stuff here, right? Personally, I'm kind of concerned about that. I don't have a lot of faith in a lot of legislatures. And I think I can best describe it this way. There's an African proverb that says, because we focused on the snake, we missed the scorpion. And I think a lot of legislators are going to say, legislature people are going to say, we have to do something about AI. We have to pass a bill. I have to have my name on something. Right? We're going to do this bill because I kind of understand it. And I think there's a great chance that that's going to be the snake, and they've completely missed the scorpion. I guess the only other piece that I thought was really interesting is there's a congressman in the United States who's going back to college to get his PhD in artificial intelligence. Wonderful. He's going to understand these technologies at a deep level, right? Which means we only have 534 other legislatures who haven't. And that really just kind of concerns me. So you gotta pay attention to it. But personally, I'm concerned that they're going to go too far, too fast with no real understanding.
Now, go ahead.
I agree. I mean, this whole data security stuff is another attribute that you need to take care of. There's a phrase that I heard that I've always latched onto, and it's basically what you're saying. If we protected our toothbrushes like we protected our diamonds, we would lose a whole lot fewer toothbrushes and a whole lot more diamonds. And I think that's that whole, focus on the risk part of it that is just so important.
Right. Many organizations are interested in building their own large language models, but are concerned about data security. How can they go about creating these models while also ensuring their company and data remains secure?
That's really important, and it kind of comes back to this whole governance model thing. And the key idea here is this toothbrushes versus diamonds thing, right? Different use cases will require different policies, and you have to start there. Start with the diamonds. Forget about the toothbrushes for a while, right? So, and some of those cases are, if you're going home at night and writing stories for your kids, who cares? This is probably not confidential data. Have fun, play with it, learn what works. If you're writing an email, well, are you going to mark that email confidential when you send it? If so, you probably don't want to be doing it on ChatGPT on an open platform. If you're not, that's a different story, right? It's a different use case. If you're doing marketing copy, it's probably going to be public in a few weeks anyway. Is it really that important that it, that's a different use case. But if you're a medical doctor, there are legal requirements that you have to manage when you're dealing with personally identifiable information, PII, or personal health information. It's not up to you whether you take care of that or not. And OpenAI and Bard and all of those guys, they don't make any guarantees. You cannot put that data there. If you're a lawyer and you're working with your client's data, at least some of that data, it has to remain confidential. You have to protect it. So, you got to look at what your use case is and how confidential that data has to remain, and then look at your provider. If the provider guarantees you that, then go ahead and use it. If it doesn't, don't. And that may mean that you have to build a local language model because you've decided that you want to take care of these use cases that require that super level of confidential information. Otherwise, and I think both strategies are valuable.
Right.
Some things are on premises, some things are in the cloud.
Right. Right. Yeah, in some cases, users can be, unfortunately, the weakest link. It's all about setting guardrails, but also about corporate culture, about training and different approaches. Like you said, you can't, if you hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But you need to, have a more nuanced approach to the different use cases. So generative AI obviously has incredible opportunities and potentially troubling challenges like the creation of deep fakes and fake news. How should society and businesses navigate this duality?
I wish I had a better answer for you, but I think the reality of the situation is this. Large language models are a brand new technology, and we've just entered a brave, brand new world, and it's unexplored. Nobody has standard guidelines yet to tell you that this is all you have to do and you'll be okay. I don't think anything like that exists. I will make some recommendations. I think they're good for today, but realize that some of them are not, and they're going to have to change, and you're going to have to change them. And, company A may have to change them one way, and company B may have to change them in exactly the opposite way. It just depends on your situation. But I will make a couple of recommendations. One is, I think you need to get started with a governance board. Maybe it's just kind of informal to begin with. Maybe you're adding an AI flavor to an existing set of governance policies that you already have. That would be better, but do something today. Get started today. It's going to change, but it's better than waiting. I talked about how the use cases are different from different policies. So that is, you need to start out with 4 or 5 pieces of paper, on the whiteboard here to get started with. I would encourage everybody to encourage their employees to play with this technology because they're going to use it. You just don't want to drive it underground. If you say nobody can ever use it anywhere, I think you're just cutting yourself off from a lot of really interesting education that you could be gaining, right?
Right, exactly.
So I would definitely encourage that. And then I would suggest there are 2 principles that you need to follow, and they're not actually all that bizarre. One is require transparency. If you use generative AI, say so. And this includes, Mr. Boss just gave me an assignment. I went home last night. I typed it literally into ChatGPT 4. Here's exactly what it gave me, and I gave it right back to my boss. But I told him I used ChatGPT. Now the boss should say, well, that's really interesting, Scott. What did we learn from this? What went well? What didn't go well? If you were to do it again, what would you do differently? Have those discussions, not only at a business level, so your business gets smarter, but to train your employees so each employee gets smarter, right? So require transparency is number one. The second one is require accountability. If I put my name on something, it's my reputation. I don't want any of this. Well, ChatGPT told me that. That's not an excuse. That's just wrong, right? Those 2 principles aren't new. I mean, this is what we've been requiring for decades, right? You have to be transparent. You have to be accountable. If it's your name and your reputation. I think there are other things that we could talk about here too, but I think those are the big ones to get started with. Don't drive it underground. Learn what you can while you can.
So apart from generative AI, are there any other AI or data trends that you think our audience should keep an eye on?
I do. The one that I'm most interested in is the Internet of Things, and in particular, artificial intelligence of things. I told you I got involved in that with this elder care project. I thought that was a fabulous project. I've still got ideas I'm working on. IoT is going to explode even more than it has. I think the generative AI has sucked all the oxygen out of the room, and that's why we're not really talking about the metaverse, and blockchain is kind of fallen back. IoT is kind of hidden back in there, I think, a little bit, but it's going to become very interesting. And IoT data is not really like image data, right? It's
Mhm.
not really like this textual data that we've been talking about. It's
Mhm.
kind of different, but AI can still be applied to that. And so many devices can work with that data. I mean, I think we were talking about, hooking into our cars, right?
Mhm.
That's a lot of IoT data that would be very interesting to tap
Of course,
into. So
it's
that's
basically
that's the one I'm watching.
it's a computer on wheels nowadays, right?
Exactly.
And I think the other part being, when you were talking about sensors, it's all about connected experience, right? With cars, connected cities, connected homes, and a lot of capabilities. Like even when you talk to your Google Assistant or Amazon Alexa, I shouldn't say that too loud in my house. Everything's gonna listen up. But that's a large language model, right? And it's natural language processing, and then providing you assistance back. So all the smart assistance capabilities, and
and
there's more
using
AI
large
already in our world that we actually realize.
and using a large language model to control and get information from a very low level IoT device, I think that makes perfect sense, right?
Mhm.
Alexa, turn on my lights. Well, that's
Mhm.
IoT, all kinds of things.
Right, right. No, that's great. So, in the last podcast, I have, introduced a rapid fire round where we ask rapid questions. So, are you ready for that? Are you ready to get started? It's basically, you answer with just a sentence or a sentence or two. So, Scott, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go. Favorite AI model you've ever worked with?
I'd have to say graphical neural networks. I think
Mhm.
they bring the best of artificial intelligence and the best of graphical databases. And I think that's a really, really cool way to approach a lot of problems.
Okay. Most overhyped AI trend.
I'm going to have to go with artificial general intelligence. I mean, we're going to get there someday, but we're not there today, in my opinion. Not everybody agrees with that, but I don't think we're there yet. Um, the other thing is the most underhyped technology, I think, is this whole trustworthy AI, reliable AI, or responsible AI. I think those are technologies that we need to put a lot more effort into, and they're not getting all the attention they deserve, in my opinion.
Okay. If you could put it in one word, the future of AI in one word.
I'm going to go with two: pervasive and unavoidable. I think it's definitely both of those.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, a book that you would recommend for those interested in AI?
One of the books that I've recommended to a lot of people, this is if you're, a beginner or kind of intermediate. This isn't, how all the technology works. But there's a book called The Master Algorithm by Pedro Domingos. And his his premise, well, the thing that I like about the book and the reason I recommend it is he talks about the five tribes. And these are five fundamentally different algorithms that are used in the AI community that they each have strengths and they each have weaknesses. And that's why I would recommend this book. Pedro is trying to take the best of the five and merge them into a single master algorithm that will do everything.
Mhm.
His proposal, I don't think, has caught on. If it's a decade old book, and if it was going to, I think it would have. But his question is right on. But I like the five tribes. It will open your eyes to the different kinds of AI that people can use.
Nice. Before we wrap up, Scott, do you have any final words of wisdom for Bytes of Brilliance audience?
I do. IBM has made this statement, and I think it's definitely worth repeating. AI is not going to replace people. It's people who use AI are going to replace people who don't use AI.
Right.
Um, I strongly recommend not that you understand all the bits and bytes of AI, but begin to play with these technologies because it's pervasive and unavoidable in our future.
Great, great. All right, Scott, it's been an incredible conversation. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise and insights. To our listeners, stay curious, stay brilliant, keep innovating, and remember to tune in to the next episode of Bytes of Brilliance. See you next time.